this and whatever. And in seeing other kind of bigger podcasters, and by bigger podcasters, I mean literally every other podcast that's bigger than me, kind of backing away from things that are censored. I figure, what better way to hold up a middle finger than to go straight in with you? And in that light, all of your books have recently been banned from Amazon. But because I'm rude and not a good host, please introduce yourself, man.
Sure. I'm on the Tommy Kerrigan show. My name is George Webb. I think he's got a great show, and he's got he's just a great interviewer, and I like his style. So anyway, I'm an author and a journalist here in Michigan, and like Tommy said, I just had 42 books taken down, which was kind of a bummer because that was a whole year's work. And before that, I had 4,000 videos and 4 years' work taken down. But I tell you, each time they come at you, here's your chance to make it better. Come out with a 4-book set that summarizes the 40, that summarizes the 4,000. Yeah.
Get better and better, get cleaner and quicker. It's absolutely what it is, man. It forces you to it. And as with the case of this podcast, everything's off the top of my head. It's a lot like the nuclear bunker system started under FDR, right? I mean, we can look at the waves of bombers that we would expect the Soviets to launch over the oceans post-World War II. And then in light of the nuclear bomb, it was, we need bunkers. And then under Eisenhower got it down to, I think he said 1,600 seconds from the time we detect a launch to the time the president gets behind the blast door. Because it makes, you got to get quicker. You got to have landing zones all over the place. They have Secret Service. They got code names. They call it the relocation arc because there's not, we all think of NORAD or Mount Weather or the Greenbrier, but they call it the arc because there's hundreds still classified. But the point is no, it makes you better. You have to get tighter and quicker. I mean, I have everything on BitChute, Rumble, and Spotify, and I'm going to start uploading to Odyssey. It's what you have to do. But also, and it's what I think it's what I said to you, is you take flak when you're over the target, right? And it's a good thing. And you got to look at it as, am I in good company? And I had on last week Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. And he's been like permabanned from YouTube. They unpersoned him on LinkedIn. I would never have been able to get him if that didn't happen. So it's the same with you. I think there's something good about it. But again, I'm not letting you talk. What was the reason they gave you for removing all your books?
Yeah, well, I like the bunker thing because I have been to a lot of those locations, Raven Rock and all that. Rock
really?
Raven. Yeah. I haven't been down in the bowels, but you know, there is a system, and one of the FBI agents that I have interviewed, or the son of FBI agent I've interviewed, was a part of that civil defense network and all that. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. But as far as going forward, my strategy is, like you said, is to fan out, use a link tree at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. There's a link tree right at the top, Rumble, all those that you just said. And then the other thing is, finger in the eye of the establishment is the way to go. And I think, you're doing the right thing there too. So I think you're hitting on all cylinders here. I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm just kind of summarizing the things you said. I agree with everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, you got to do it, man. It's like I don't know, maybe it's just because I was younger, but I remember when I was like 18 in high school, and at night, like I was 18, I was finally allowed to have like a TV in my room, and like I remember watching like Colbert and like Jon Stewart. And again, I was 18 and I was like, we're on the right side, right? And I at least kind of thought they were funny. Now, I don't know if they were actually funny if I was just younger. But man, Tim Dillon said it best. There's something about when you turn on any like nightly show, and it's just like, you don't want to believe in the occult, but goddamn, have these people not sold their souls? They're all just, it's the same talking points. It's the white man's bad. Anyway, the government's going to come to your house with a machine gun and a vaccine. You're going to take it because you're a patriot. It's like, dude, what happened to like Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony, or just, what happened to just any sort of like life behind it? So other than the fact that I think it's a righteous fight, I also just think it's like, it's just a cooler fight. Like, you know, it's like, yeah.
It's more like being in the French Resistance, and you have no chance, you know.
Yeah.
And so you just want to be just ridiculous chances every day to save little kittens, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
I said that before with my buddy Don, who has a podcast. You should go. His podcast is much bigger than mine. But we talked about it. I was like, yeah, man, it's like the whole idea of like you're gonna live in a pod, you know, you're gonna own nothing and be happy. And it's like, it's not that I want to, you know, some people are like, dude, just give in and everything will be better. And it's like, I don't want to live in that world, you know. It's like if I can't be in Raven Rock, then I want to be at Ground Zero. I don't want to live in the nuclear winter. That's, what is it, Khrushchev? The living will envy the dead in a nuclear winter. Like, it's kind of the same way. Like, I mean, I don't think my chances are good fighting the powers that be, but man, do you want to live in that world? Do you want to live in that world where there's a blue YouTube label on everything? This is COVID. This is QAnon. This is a hateful far right. Fact checkers have disputed. I mean, do you really want to live there? I mean, I truly, I mean, I know it's a cheesy and kind of overstated cliche, but I mean, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And it's the French Resistance, but it's also, there's like a little punk rock to it. There's a little like, you know, I went to a private Catholic high school. You weren't allowed to have hair past your eyebrows, your ears, or your neck. So I had hair that skimmed the line. As soon as I went to college and it was no longer a rule, I cut my hair short, and it's been this short for 12 years. It's right.
Right.
There's something about that though, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I like your attitude there, and it is a lot of courage, and it is a lot of self-determination that I'm going to live my own life. And you know, I'm a vax person. If it's tested, you know, let's try animals first. You know, we could, you know, I mean, let's and even mice. I'm even nice to the animals. I don't want the bigger animals to die until the mice go. You know, so. This is totally backward. This is people first. It's like, well, we got too many people, and we've become accustomed to the mice. We like the mice. You're first.
Man, it's like, see, I don't even have that heart that you do. I'm like injected into every animal but us, and like, I know I've stated it so many times in this podcast, it makes people's eyes roll out of their head. I got into medical school, like 15,000 people applied to the medical school I got into. 100 got in. So if I may, like, I am a student of science. I love biology. I have all of my vaccines. I've had on, but the point I always bring up with people is like, this isn't anti-vax. It's not anti-vax at all. What this is me and Mr. Webb are hanging out at a bar, and I come up to him and I go, "Hey man, take this shot. I just bought it for us." And you go, "Oh, what nice. What is it?" And I go, "Don't worry about it. Just take it." And you're like, "Is it whiskey? Is it vodka?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Just take it." And you're like, "Yo, just tell me what it is." Because you're like, "I don't like tequila." And then the bartender looks at you and goes, "Just take it." And everyone in the bar starts looking at you and going, "Just take." "Oh, you pussy. What? Are you a teetotaler? You don't drink?" And everyone's going, "Just take it." And you're going, "Dude, just tell me what it." You're like, "I've taken all the other shots you've given me, all the other vaccines." You're like, "Just tell me what it is." Now I'm just curious. I don't even care anymore. If it is tequila, I'll take it and throw up. It's fine. But Tom, you're being really weird. And then the cops come in and they go, "Stop talking about this." So you go on Facebook, you go, "Tommy's trying to give me a weird shot." And it gets removed for misinformation. It goes, "All shots have been deemed fun and sexy." At a certain point, though, it's not even about the shot anymore. You're just like, why can't I talk about it? It's the biggest red flag to where if they said, hey, a side effect is I don't know, maybe your love life might be shitty for a month. Maybe you can't come. You'd be like, all right, thank you for telling me it's a bad side effect, but thanks for telling. I get it. Sure. Okay. But when every news station, when every representative, when every celeb, the Teletubbies, I don't know if you saw that in the news today. The Teletubbies came out with a little dance saying, "We're vax, are you?" When this dystopian shit just goes for. So finally, when I go, okay, let's go back to the source. What is the inventor of it saying? Dr. Robert Mullins. Do a little research. Who is this guy? He invented it. Go on YouTube. I can't find anything on YouTube. I find his Twitter. That's weird. He's been banned from LinkedIn. Oh, he went on Brett Weinstein. Okay, Oh, he got banned from there too. Okay. Well, now there's nothing you can tell me to get it, because now I'm like, what? And again, I know I'm just kind of talking off my ass, and you got to throw some elbows to get in here and talk with me. But it's just creepy. It's just creepy now.
Let me say, I think you're way funnier than Jon Stewart or anyone. Yeah. I would rather listen to your comedy routine right there.
Thanks.
That was the best 10 minutes of comedy I think I've seen in the last 3 minutes. Well, we have a guy who comes on our show,
okay.
Decode. It was pretty funny, but that was pretty funny stuff.
Oh, thank you.
And I like the situational comedy as well. It's really funny, and it is, when you put it that way, it's not only funny, it's pithy. It's exactly what's happening. And I didn't. Are you still in med school? You're out of med school?
No. So I got in, and I graduated UGA, University of Georgia, in December 2013. Worked my ass off for 4 years to get in. I got in, and then realized I wasn't happy, and was like, I don't want to do this. And then very long story short, I got into medical school, decided I didn't want to go, and I was like, I got a new life ahead of me. Like a month later, my oldest brother committed suicide, and then I just went on like a drug bender for 6 years, and moved home with my parents. Started this podcast above their garage, and actually the day COVID outbroke, December 12th, 2019, and found after about 200 episodes, I was working at a liquor store, going crazy, pulling my hair out, IDing people a decade younger than me. And so I made a video, like a 5-minute video, and I was like, will somebody please invest in my podcast? Give me enough money to move out. The stars aligned, and some dude who's got the paper reached out to me and was like, I fucking love your podcast, man. I'll give you some money. So I've got a very unconventional contract where this guy is going to give me 3 years of living expenses to try to turn this into a profitable enterprise. I know you didn't ask all that, but no. So I didn't go to medical school. I got in, which is why people roll their eyes. They're like, congratulations, you got in. You're not a doctor. Shut up.
No, well, I mean, you said a lot there. I mean, I could write a book about what you just said right there.
Insane, dude.
It's Tommy the Gun, because I always want to have a little hook in there for people to remember the gun, right? The guns, yeah, right. Tommy the Guns, Kerrigan. But that there's some huge stuff that you went through really quick, and I just have tremendous admiration for you. We have a guy named Addy Ads, who is similar age. He's 26, right in there, 27. Made the similar decision. Couldn't teach. He wanted to teach. Couldn't teach because of COVID. Now what do I do? And then just said, shit, I'm going to do this thing because nobody else is interviewing the doctors. You're interviewing the doctors, or the inventor of the mRNA. I saw that. Great interview.
Thank you.
He was doing the same thing, interviewing these early guys who were talking about the doctors talking about COVID when there was no information out there. So I don't care who it is that breaks through and brings some truth and light. If you're 25 or you're 75, it doesn't matter, and you're doing it. And I think that mRNA thing really, I learned a lot from the podcast, and I think you guys have the guts. I like young people for this reason, amongst a whole bunch of other reasons, but they don't get caught into I can't do it. They say, forget it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to call them, I'm going to, they do it.
Yeah.
Like you called me. And so I love it, and that's what brings you the news. And these are you're the new breed, right? That's going to go and say, screw it. I don't have anything to lose. I'm going to go get the interview.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I realize I'm talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I was just excited I realize when I look back when I have on guests that I've been trying to get on, I get really excited and I don't shut up. And I'm realizing the ratio of me to Mr. Webb is like 80-20. I gotta slow it down, slow the roll. But you're right, and there's just something isn't right when we can't discuss it. And 2008, I voted for Obama. I was 18. Hope and change. 2012, I voted for Romney because I was pre-med and I was like, fuck this Obamacare. I want my full paycheck. 2016, I was in the deepest part, the lowest depression of my life, and I voted for Bernie in the primaries because more than anything, I was like, I need mental health care. In 2020, I voted for Trump because I was like, fuck these communists. But I always say this is like, I'm not afraid to eat my hat or eat my shoe or whatever the saying. I like being wrong. I enjoy it because when you're taking these tests to get into medical school, when you're taking the MCAT or you're taking organic chemistry, you don't take a wrong answer as a personal affront. You go, okay, a ketone doesn't turn into an aldehyde when you add what noted. Okay. If you email someone and go, yo, you want to come on my podcast and shoot the shit? They don't really like that. So when you say, hello, Mr. Webb, I'm Thomas Kerrigan, I'm 30 years old, blah, blah, blah. Here's some notable guests I have on. This is what the podcast is about. And then they respond, you go, oh, okay, that works. It's not one of those like cheesy like posters, but there's no losing. There's no winning and losing. There's winning and learning. You go, noted, that didn't work. Noted, that didn't work. Okay, let's open the third door. And so I don't mind being wrong. I don't at all. So when I have on physicians and people are like, why are you being anti-vax? I invite physicians, please come on here and run circles around me. Tear me a new one. Be like, listen, you 30-year-old moron. You're not an MD. You're not a PhD. Do it. Make me blush. I won't edit it out. And I will happily be made a fool. Because it's what Dr. Mobeen Saeed said. I had him on last Friday. I said, I was like, he's an MD. I was like, you're the professor, I'm the student. And he said, no. He goes, we're all students and we're all exploring this world together. And we have been for 10,000 years, whether it's finding out which crops work and you got to turn the soil, whether it's finding out, hey, if we put nitrogen in the soil, we can triple crop yields, whether it's, hey, these two jackasses in three-piece suits named the Wright brothers are like, I think we can make a heavier than aircraft. And it's just little things, Joseph Lister and germ theory, all the way up to whatever, Steve Jobs making it so I can have a terabyte phone that costs $500. We really are all, and I know this is, again, it just sounds like some cheesy, like, we are the world shit, but like, we are all in this, we're on this shitty rock floating through the universe. Like, we are on the same side. When you can't have that discussion, when you get removed from Amazon, man, if the hairs don't start to prick up a little bit, it's not even like we're looking back at like learn from history, the ancient Roman. No, it's like there are still people alive today that were in concentration camps. We're not learning shit. It's coming full circle. So with that, let's kind of move towards that way. You've been doing research amongst other things, and I'll put your Twitter and your website and everything in here, about the origins of COVID. What are your newest revelations showing?
Well, let me get there and let me comment about what you just said, which is, we're all learning. And I'm sorry, I'm in a kind of a, I'm getting all these messages, but I have to because of certain people.
I don't care, anyway. Man. I don't care. Do whatever.
Okay. So the bottom line is, that's what's called technology. And that's why, like you said, the Earth's carrying capacity has gone up. And I'm very much in the same camp as I don't have all the answers. I just present facts and I just follow facts. And if they lead me to a conclusion, I put out what I call a working theory. And I say, okay, based on what I see here, I'm a little bit disturbed. And it seems a little bit like something's not right here. Something's rotten in Holland here. So what happened with the source of the COVID was, we have a group of people like you and different citizen journalists come together every once in a while, about a dozen people, about once a month. And because we're in such a virtual world, we never meet each other. We never know where we live. We all come together and see each other off camera and see what we're like off camera and get to know each other. It's kind of like news camp, you know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, we go through stories of the day. And we play this game called Newsroom. So you say, okay, what's your story of the day? Just like they do in a real newsroom. And then using our terabyte phone, I didn't realize you could get a terabyte.
I don't actually think it's a terabyte. I think I lied.
Well, that's great. I was like, where do you get a terabyte phone?
I'm fake news. I'm sorry. This podcast is over.
We're done. And we go around the room, and then the person who, described the first story then sees if they can add something to the reporter's story that the reporter left out by doing different searches. So we have a thing, compound search. We'll say Tommy the Guns Kerrigan and great interviews. And then up would come the mRNA guy interview, the Saeed guy interview, etc. I might be down there somewhere in the 50 to 75.
Give yourself some credit. Don't put yourself down.
No, but you get the idea is that you have a whiteboard there and you're writing up all the things that are coming up. And this is exactly what happened. This is how I got in trouble with CNN. This is how I got in trouble with 60 Minutes. But we were all ready to talk about, I had magnets literally made up of all the henchmen in Ukraine. This guy named Kolomoisky was doing all these dark weapons with Adam Schiff. And, here's all the people involved in this dark weapons thing with Peter Strzok. And so I'm ready to talk about something else. Okay. And this guy who works at the White House, works for a Japanese television station. He's a producer, and he came down from D.C. to this thing. This is a little island about 40 miles off of it's on the Potomac River, about 40 miles south of D.C. And he says, hey, did you see this one story about the source of COVID, where the Chinese Foreign Ministry, official source, is accusing the American athletes that came to Wuhan in October of 2019 of bringing the virus to Wuhan? Wow, that's a big story. I mean, I haven't heard that one. No, it's a real story. And so people start bringing up the articles and so forth. And there's only 300 U.S. athletes. There's 300,000 people. They're coming to this event, and now CNN is saying, yeah, that's the super spreader event. But back then it was like, no, it can't be that bringing 300,000 people to an Olympic Games, that can't be the event. It has to be one fishmonger and one, Lee Harvey lab coat and Lee Harvey fishmonger, getting together.
They have to be white wearing MAGA hats. That's the only way it's super spreader.
Yeah. I mean, they really had it down to, it can't be the event where we had everyone marching in shoulder-to-shoulder formation.
In Wuhan. It can't be that.
No. No, it has to be Lee Harvey lab coat. And I didn't really have a problem necessarily with that, other than they said, well, who are they talking about? Who are the 300 athletes? So right away, we divided and looked up all the people that we could see articles about. And the first thing that we saw was the Americans did really bad. There was something like over 100 countries, and America was in the low 30s to 40s placing, and they only won one medal in the over 35s or the Masters. So right off the bat, you're like, wow, we spend more in our budget than all the other militaries of the world times 10. You'd think we could come up with some good athletes, that would be winning at least, we'd be first or second or third or maybe fourth, at the worst. So, you know what I mean? And so right away there was all this, hey, this does not compute. Maybe we did have COVID. Maybe that's why our athletes did so poorly. Okay. I mean, here's what the foreign minister is saying. We have all the data. We have hundreds of thousands of scientists. We've been working on this for 6 months. This is in March of 2020. We've looked at all the data. It's you guys, right? You brought it here.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's the story.
Oh, shit. Yeah, because it's not like the U.S. Well, first of all, you think DARPA would be able to make some untraceable steroids, if we really wanted, right? But I mean, also just with the Olympics, right? I mean, basketball. American sports, we always dominate at. Why wouldn't they? Were they all sick?
That's what we're thinking, right? Okay, so we keep going around. This is good. We'll step through this story because this is the big story, right? Yeah, exactly. We'll get there. The next thing is there's this athlete who is a cyclist. She's a Dutch cyclist. And somebody said she's a Dutch cyclist. And I said, oh, well, maybe the Dutch brought it. And no. She's a Dutch cyclist on the American team. And I said, no, you don't understand how it works. See, if you're a Dutch cyclist, you compete on the Dutch team. You're not an embedded, agent in the American team. You compete on the Dutch team. No, we got it right here. It's right on a military time. She competes for the Americans. She was embedded in the American team. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Let's run her information. And then bang, comes back immediately. She's what they call an armed diplomatic security services person for the State Department.
I've had on a DSS guy.
Okay.
Fred Burton, yeah. Retired. He's yeah.
He's a U.S. State Department guy, meaning she answers to Hillary Clinton, and Henry Kissinger. She doesn't answer to, the whatever. I mean, she's working. She's currently employed since 2016 to 2020 as U.S. State Department. Now, all of a sudden, my hackles are up. You mentioned the frog hairs in the back of your neck. You're like, hey, wait a minute. This does have some validity here. This person isn't just a regular athlete. Yeah. She's Dutch, and then she's 52, which is interesting. A little bit old.
Yeah, it's not the athletic, yeah.
To be a military athlete. She had a great career, but she's a little bit old now. And then the other thing is she finishes in last place, meaning she could have been sick. Now, she also crashed during the thing. So it could be she's crashed. She's, like running out of red blood. She doesn't have the Lance Armstrong EPO injection.
Yeah.
So anyway, we find that she works directly for, or had worked directly for, the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Now, wow, okay.
Hold on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
you're just a reasonable person. You're sitting there and you're listening and you're going, wow. So what CNN would have you believe is, and 60 Minutes later on, that I saw a chance at a lighting on some person, and I had planned this whole thing, and I was going to make this person's life miserable. Okay, that's not the case. This Chinese foreign minister was saying the Americans brought patient zero here, and this person, the team performed very poorly. That was in keeping what he said. And then this person looked like they were exhibiting the, symptoms. Well, the other thing that happened, and I'm just taking you through it, is, the guy did 12 tweets on this thing. It wasn't just one tweet. And the reason why he's tweeting is because this guy named Redfield, who's our CDC director, is testifying in front of the Senate. And he's saying, actually, we did have some breakouts of some unknown pneumonias and influenzas in the summer of 2019. Near Fort Belvoir, where this person worked, this 52-year-old Dutch cyclist was embedded, we had a big breakout of something, and a whole bunch of people died, but we didn't do any autopsies. And they said, well, Senator says, isn't that your job to do autopsies when people die of something new and novel? Because that's how you know if it's an outbreak or not. They go, well, we normally do that, but we didn't this time.
Okay. You're right. Okay, sure.
Yeah, we didn't this time. We decided to throw an exception in there.
Egg on our face.
It sounds like a cover-up, And that's when this guy flipped out. This just Chinese foreign minister guy, because he goes, hey, wait a minute. You put all these people on a plane, and they all got checked out medically at this Fort Belvoir in Virginia, and you put them all on a plane, and then they went to Texas and then on to China. You did that. And then knowing that you had all these people dying near the fort and you didn't tell us. So it's kind of like you loaded a gun and basically threw it in a baby carriage. We didn't know that it was there. So it turns out later on that, maybe not in support of my story, but it's a very unfortunate part, there was 2 doctors, or a black doctor who was the person who gave all the clean bill of health, or he gave the bill of health and checked out the athletes at Fort Belvoir. And he was murdered on his lawn about a month ago.
Yeah. I saw that on your Twitter, yeah.
And his wife, who's also a colonel and also was in the Clinton White House as the personal nurse to Hillary Clinton.
She was murdered?
She was murdered. So,
just take the shot. Why won't you just take the shot? It might be tequila. It might not be. Stop asking questions. Take the fucking shot. It's kind
of like Vince Foster,
Yeah,
if you remember that, it's like, wait a minute.
So you're telling me James G. Zangleton had a 201 file on Lee Harvey Oswald as early as 1959? Yeah. You're telling me Lee Harvey Oswald said, "I'm a patsy"? Yeah. When asked if the agency did the hit on Jack, James G. Zangleton, while the head of the CIA counterintelligence office, said, "The agency is a large mansion, and I know not all of the rooms." Yeah. So is Lee Harvey the lone gunman? Yeah. Stop asking questions. Okay. All right.
Well, it does.
Right.
It does pique your interest, right? I mean, it's kind of like, well, that's odd. I mean, these aren't people that are not connected. She's in the Clinton White House and doing all the nursing for the top people like Bill Clinton and, and Vince Foster, so and I went there to
George Webb didn't kill himself. Tommy Kerrigan didn't kill himself.
Well, I mean, it's not my place to jump to conclusions. It's just my place. I'm writing this on the board. Well, if you'll look at where the screenshot that 60 Minutes takes, or if you look at the 60 Minutes and CNN, they take a screenshot as we're writing these things on the board. It says Armed Diplomatic Security Services, works for the head of NATO, 4-star general, probably Stavridis during the Libya conflict. Could be James Jones. We're just writing stuff on the board. Could be Bouchard. Okay, so they're making it out like, oh, I'm out there selling this and making all this thing. Well, part of the thing that went crazy is that video of that first day somehow got to China. And then it went to 1 million views almost in 24 hours. And in 24 hours, Forbes had done a hit piece on me. Reuters had done a hit piece on me. I can't remember, BuzzFeed. This guy, wild conspiracy theorist, says the lone cyclist is the one the Chinese were talking about. Then the Chinese, and we're not even to the good stuff yet, but then the Chinese foreign minister agrees that it's the lone cyclist that brought it. Okay, so I'm like, it was sort of patient zero. I didn't have time to write the question mark, but anyway, so that may have been the mistake on day one. But what it led to, Tommy, was the thing that I was so surprised about, because we went right to the head guy at NATO, and immediately we found another. Well, first of all, her husband also seemingly worked. Después, por favor, gracias. Sorry, I'm in a hotel. So
you're in a safe house in Mexico City.
I'm in a safe house in Mexico City. Raven Rock.
I just see like a red laser on your forehead. George, get down! This is 12-hour podcast. That's the second 11 and a half hours are just you and I sitting here bleeding out. Jesus Christ.
This is too good.
But right. sorry, the second and so to interrupt you, devil's advocate though, the Chinese not that I have any problem with making fun of the Chinese, but they would have an interest in saying that it's with agreeing with your story that it came from the U.S. Just as we have an interest in saying it came from Wuhan.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is just journalism at this point.
Just taking the facts. Okay.
This is a story you don't know about that I'm going to tell you about, etc. And we're going to add to it. So we're going around the room. So the next person, this is even before the first story. We're live streaming. Okay. So the next person says, well, that's really interesting because there's this person. I write about her husband too. He's in SPAWAR, which is space warfare, for 13 years. He works at the Pentagon. He's the liaison to NATO. Looks like he's the liaison to NATO's space program, NASA satellites, and in this area of biosurveillance. So when you have a breakout, all the ants move differently. Sort of like when you pour the ants on the hot water on the ants, or with a magnifying glass, the ants move differently than when they don't. And they start, like people who've never left their village before, all of a sudden start going to trains in China. And you watch this from the satellites.
Wait,
so he's in
sorry, why were they watching? Is because they knew there was an outbreak, or is this just general surveillance of
all over the world? The way biosurveillance is done is if they see normal patterns of people going to their work and then going home, all of a sudden changing and getting on trains and going to hospitals, because in most parts of the world there isn't a hospital that's close by.
Does that imply a bigger story though?
Yeah.
Why were they surveilling? Why do they know the everyday patterns of random people? I think you might have tripped over a much bigger story.
That's a whole story.
Did they know there was an outbreak, or were they preemptively surveilling the patterns of 7 billion people, and then they found a disturbance, and they later found out it was a biological thing as opposed to a financial or geological or sorry.
There's a good chance that happened. There's a Harvard study out that used satellite surveillance on the Yangtze River and saw a breakout potentially in as early as August up the Yangtze about 1,000 miles in Chengdu. It's a city called Chengdu. And it just so happens Blackwater and the military and police and fire games were happening 2 months earlier in Chengdu, where a lot of people were coming and going. And, Blackwater would never start a war.
Not Eric Prince and the boys.
Yeah. But anyway, so there was this surveillance, this satellite surveillance of around the Blackwater games about 2 months earlier that the Harvard study came out. But I didn't know that at the time. So what we were just looking at is, hey, this is a guy who seems to have a relationship with another guy, and the last name's Benassi, okay? Which is not a very common English name, but apparently common in Italy.
It's also a famous techno DJ.
Oh, that Benny comes
Benassi.
Benny comes into the story. Don't worry.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Don't worry. Benny's in the CNN report and everything.
The door opens in your hotel, and it's just Benny Benassi, and he's like, I told you to just stop asking questions, George. I told you to just listen to the beat.
He's coming. He's coming.
Sorry, keep going.
He's going to be in the story, believe me. No, interject along, because it's a little bit of a long story. But there's this guy named Pietro Benassi who is in the satellite surveillance for NATO as well, and has been used a lot for these breakouts in Africa and Asia and so forth. So it just, right off the bat, there seems to be everybody in this family is involved in biosurveillance, But up until that point, nothing really too bad, right? But then...
Sorry, it's like when your grandpa makes like horseshoes and your dad makes horseshoes, and it's just a small family business. We've been doing this since 1824. We just been doing biosurveillance. Grandpappy was a biosurveillance. Grandpappy was a biosurveillance. Bullshit. Sorry.
With satellites.
Grandpappy's satellites. Pappy's satellites. Far back as we can remember.
I'm never getting.
We live in a simulation, man. This can't be real. There's no way this is real.
Oh my god!
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, this is too good. Well, anyway, we're not even around the ring. We're in the second person. Oh. Benny Benassi's the third person.
Benny Benassi's the head honcho.
we get to the third person. And it's this granola grandma from Oregon, and she says, "Well, there is this Virginia Benassi person who works for the WHO," and I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting. In Geneva, and works with all the vaccines with Bill Gates and Gabby and all them."
Sure.
And she just happens to be working right now on a virus that never was seen before in China in 2009 that causes bleeding,
It's been a small family business for over 200 years. Grandpa worked in Germany. Great-grandpa worked in Japan. Sorry. I'll stop interrupting. It's just...
No, it's like that. And then and she's doing this thing called a blueprint. And it's a NATO WHO blueprint. And it's the 5...
If you laugh, I'm going to laugh, man. So this is on you.
It's the 5 most expected.
All the while, there's just...
Even these are zoonotic things that happen when you get too close to a pangolin at a petting zoo, right? That's how these things happen.
Yeah.
They can still predict the 5 most likely viruses, and then they predict the 5 most likely vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. And that's this blueprint, sure. Right? And so she's actually writing the blueprint. And Tommy, God strike me dead if this isn't true. All the proposals for all of the, we put it out here's the 5 that we want your proposal for. They're selling a thing from DARPA called ADEPT, which is a way of sort of an operating system that they're introducing so that you have to make your vaccine available through this framework called ADEPT. So they're introducing ADEPT and making people go through this. And then these are all the vaccines that you're proposing. They all go to one person, Benassi V, not B, Benassi B at who.int. I'm like, wow, that's a position of power. She is the person doing the biosurveillance of these new China viruses. She knows which 5 are coming. She knows which 5, vaccines need to be produced. And she gets all the proposals. Wow, I would love to be in that position, right? Well, the other signatory to this blueprint is a guy named Sina Bavari. And Sina Bavari is an Iranian guy who's running Fort Detrick, which is our BSL-4 lab
it's our Wuhan.
It's our Wuhan, yeah. And it's been most closely associated with, like you said, bringing the Nazi...
Unit 731, Japan.
Unit 731, Japan. And all the Mengele Airtraum, Kurt Blom, all that stuff.
And I would imagine, right, Dr. Ken Albeck, who I've now had on here 3 times.
That's another reason I liked your show. You had Ken Albeck on.
Ken Albeck's such a sweetheart. He's studying, side note, he's studying autism now. His daughter has autism, and he believes that he has found the cure for it.
Yeah, well, that's
an angel. Yeah, that's a guy that, for everyone listening, he was the first deputy director of bioprepper at the Soviets' Unit 731 Offensive Biological Weapons Program, defected to the United States in 1992, spilled all the beans, has been approached by the KGB several times over the last 20 years and doesn't give a shit, and now works on like green energy technology, I believe, and is researching autism and spends most of his time doing telemedicine to poor families in Russia. An absolute angel. Sorry, just had to plug Dr. Albeck. But people like that. It's that whole program.
Right. These are the things that, there's a guy, it's called Project Vector, that's in business. He's named Jens Kuhn. He's an international diplomat for, I believe, one of the Scandinavian countries. He works with this Sina Bavari, and they've got 4 different companies that are working for different parts of the mRNA vaccine. There's the module that gets by the PEG, and the module that delivers the virions to the thing, and then there's the adhesion part of it, and then there's the injection, and then there's the reverse transcriptase. And he's got 4 companies through the University of Nebraska. So he seems like he's got like a bet on the game. You know, it's sort of like one of those guys who has a big wager, and then you see him with the dart gun shooting the horse. You know, the second. You know, it just seems like a fix.
Yeah.
Okay. That Virginia Benassi, who's getting all the proposals, is writing a document with a guy over here who, first of all, he's been cited as running the place like a concentration camp. And these are public articles. And then, but more importantly, the only lab leak that we know about still today happens at Fort Detrick in July of 2019, where it gets shut down while he's running it. So back then, when we did this story, lab leak was like, oh, that's comic book stuff. But now lab leak is, oh, it's a lab leak. Well, okay, tell me proven lab leaks in July of 2019. It's Fort Detrick. So the guy who let the virus out, who let the virus out, WHO capital, who let the virus out, is this guy, Sina Bavari. He seems like he's the guy letting the 5 out, and she's the one getting the 5 proposals, all coming to her. Another Benassi. So we're not done yet. We're getting to Benny.
Hold on. Were you doing a who let the dogs out?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I feel a little slow. I feel like I should be on a short bus. I was like, wait. I was like, who let the virus out? Gee. Hold on, wait. Dude, I gotta pee real quick. And normally I'm pretty good about not pissing during podcasts anymore, but I've been laughing my ass off this podcast, and now I really feel it. Can you tell everybody where to find you real quick? I'll be back.
Sure. I love Tommy's podcast because these are like really fun events. You can find me at Real George Webb 1, Real George Webb, WEBB 1. The numeral 1 is my Twitter. And then my, let's see, I don't think I have anything else left. Everything else has kind of been destroyed. But Neighborhood News Studio, it's a long, people sometimes misspell neighborhood. But if you type that into a browser, Neighborhood News Studio, it should take you to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. And I'll plug my book, Corona Roadshow, where we go all around to all these different places involved in the coronavirus. Like Fort Detrick. And that book is available. It's 163 pages, and it is the first summation book of the 42 books that were destroyed. So I have that book out. It summarizes all 42 of my books in the last section in the end notes, which is about a 60-page section, and it summarizes what I just said with Tommy.
Man, fuck Amazon. You're more than welcome to just like narrate your books, and I'll just put it on my podcast. I don't care. We'll just make this an audio book. But I've told people that before. I'm like, just read your book. I don't care if people are like, I can't get it on Audible. I'm like, read it and put it on here. I'll just sit here and do it. But so we're escape from Fort Detrick, 5 vaccines that were the 5 potential threats with the 5 receptive vaccines, and it looks like, could there be a business interest, or
is there? We don't know.
Okay.
So the last we're going around the room. Literally, we have 12 people. We're not even halfway around the room. The next person says, well, that's really interesting because there's this other guy named Giuseppe Benassi. And Giuseppe Benassi is the spy chief of NATO.
Jesus Christ.
And he's studying at Oberammergau, the same place that Henry Kissinger, started at, and he's there during NATO and all this. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Wow, this could all be just like, NATO planning a person on the U.S. team, blaming it on us, sort of like the Zimmerman letter, in World War I, or
and
driving letter.
Yeah, and sorry for interrupting you. And as people point out on this podcast, because I do it nauseatingly, but I feel it's necessary in a time of such like entrenched biases, playing devil's advocate, is just for myself at least. I'm just saying. I'm trying to look at it through like my lens. Like I'm clearly like as Elon Musk says, nauseatingly pro-American. I see patterns and connections that I want to see. I want to see that this is China, or I want to see that this is a U.S. covert program. So, for just really wasn't important to interject, but I try to know that I'm looking at it through a bias. So sorry, go on.
Well, people accuse me of a confirmation bias as well. They say everything's NATO. right? Everything's NATO. U.S. proxies everything out through NATO, and then NATO comes up with these things. And it's true. I did have a NATO guy in Norfolk, Virginia, to put all the cards on the table, which is where NATO ACT, the Advanced Command Transformation, is. He did threaten to Jonestown my children, and also Waco my kids, and flamethrower my kids, and he was so I do. It was from a military base where the Navy SEALs are in Little Creek, Virginia. So I do have a little bit of an antenna up from NATO. Okay.
So this guy that was providing information to you then threatened you?
Well, he invited me to come on to the Navy base. It was sort of late at night. I was returning from Florida. Hey, why don't you come over to this Navy SEAL base in Norfolk? I said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And then anyway, it turned into it got out of hand where he started threatening my family. But that had happened before I'd ever reported on this whole thing, right? I had just been talking about how NATO was involved in a lot of virus vaccines breakouts in Africa. Okay, so let's leave that aside a second. I acknowledge you saying could have confirmation bias here with me and NATO. Got it. True. But the thing that really kind of nailed it for me was this guy, Giuseppe. Okay, he's the head of like the spy chief, and he's bringing in Chinese dancers into all the, I'm not kidding, into all the capitals of Europe over a 10-year period of time. And that doesn't sound weird, but literally it's all these young, beautiful women being brought into these places where you would have diplomats who are in positions of power, and they're flaunting their, wares and so forth. And it's just the thing a spy guy would do to compromise everybody wearing shoes in a given city so that you could put your people into the top. Mm-hmm. It seemed like a Jeff Epstein compromise operation. With the Chinese have the 1,000 Talents program and all that. Why are you doing this? Why are you bringing all these Chinese people in to NATO? It just seemed like, if you saw the opening ceremonies as well, it's a huge NATO thing. All the Chinese dancers are all making the NATO emblem. They're making the WHO emblem. They're making the UN emblem, with 5,000 people. And so it just seems very odd partnership.
Again, just confirmation bias. It might also just be, that might just be the dance choreography. Like that might just, obviously I'm not an investigative journalist. I try to look at, like, if they're bringing in all these people and trying to compromise all of them, to me, that's like what I would focus on. I wouldn't, but it's not important. Keep going. Sorry.
No, it is. You're right. I should have followed one of the troops and then said they checked into this hotel, and then 8 diplomats, later were photographed, that type of investigative journalism. I'm just saying there was a lot of Benassi in the story. I basically said, this person, could very well be patient zero that the foreign ministry is talking about. There are a lot of Benassis in the story, and you can't deny that. Well, then, which is just, look at what CNN did with Trump. Hey, Trump hired all these Russian agents to hack the DNC, and that's why Hillary lost, right? So theirs was outlandish conspiracy theory. We actually ran down the DSS guy that brought in the Russian girls that supposedly hacked Trump. And he's a guy who worked, I've got him pictures at the Clinton Foundation with snipers at the Clinton Foundation. His brother did the library at the Clinton Foundation. So, I feel like these State Department people are being used for things that are not State Department business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair. Yeah.
So that, they said I'm a hoax peddler and all this stuff. I'm not a hoax peddler. These things are facts. Okay. And if we're going to look at the source of the coronavirus, why don't we look at all the facts? If you want to say lab leak, let's look at the labs that leaked. Let's look at the business interests that the guy who let the virus out. Let's look at his business interests in China. Let's look at the people he wrote the blueprint with. Who are the Benassis? And who's getting all the proposals? That's another place investigators would look. Let's look and see who's getting the money for the biosurveillance. et cetera, et cetera. So I just put a alternative out there. The WHO guy, who's Tedros, has said all theories are on the table. They started out with saying it was a pangolin that mated with a bat, and then there was a unicorn, and then, Jon Stewart made fun of that.
Yeah, but to me, I try to look at. Actually, I'll say this for the end. I don't want to keep interrupting you. It's a little rant. I'll go on towards the end.
Well, the final is I gave Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN the death threats from this guy.
I thought you just said, yeah, so I gave this guy some death threats. I was like, don't fucking say that on my podcast. I was like, fuck.
No, he gave.
Okay.
This guy, I showed him. I said, hey, here's Ken Hale's death threats.
Yeah.
And I showed him Ken Hale's death threats, and I said, hey, I'm not gaining out of this.
Yes.
My whole family being Waco'd is not helping here. I'm not gaining anything. And so basically what happened was CNN turned that completely around and said that I had picked out this random person to sell a few dollars. I was already demonetized on YouTube, so I wasn't making any money. Just because I'm a hateful, spiteful guy. And all these death threats then came in for her, which I never wished anything bad on any of these people. I just want to ask questions. Yeah. Because here's the key thing. The foreign minister, when he tweeted out, he said, tell us where your breakouts were at your hospitals for this July and August things. Make the public records available. Tell us what the hospitals are, and make the health records of the athletes available so we can figure this out. Which seems very reasonable, because that's what we're asking the Chinese to do right now for millions of people. That's what we need to do to get on an airplane, to go to Canada, to go to church, to go to a ball game, to go to a concert. What's the big deal? 300 athletes with the records? No big deal. So there's some big cover-up going on for some reason. We don't know why. So they took a story where, I was getting the death threats and turned it completely around to me wanting to hurt someone, which is completely false. And that's why I'm suing CNN, because it's not the news, right? And the CNN has to respond to my affidavit on the 19th. It's not the news, it's the twist of the news and the weaponization of the news. Say, if you don't say something that is in agreement and you bring forward facts we don't like, we're going to twist it around and make you look like the bad guy. Yeah. We're going to have everybody come after you. I got a whole bunch of death threats after that, after the CNN thing aired, and they kept airing it. Right? So
how's that any different than inciting violence? It's rules for thee, not for me.
60 Minutes compared me somehow, quoting the Chinese foreign minister, somehow to the shooting up in Connecticut with the shooting. They brought in the guy who did the shooting, the massacre at the school. I went up there and did a story. All of a sudden, I'm forgetting the name of the school where all the kids got killed, and some people.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook, yeah. They brought in and somehow compared me to Sandy Hook. What? I'm talking about the games. So anyway, now 17 months has gone by. We've gone away from Lee Harvey Fishmonger, and we've gone away from Lee Harvey Lab Coat. Now we're at Lab Leak. We're not yet at where were the lab leaks. Let's start there, which was Fort Detrick. But we're getting there. So, and Sanjay Gupta now with CNN is saying, okay, yeah, probably was a lab leak, because the CDC director. Damn. Yeah, the CDC director.
Redfield was saying that back in March.
Yeah. So as time goes by, my case is being proven by CNN. If I just leave the judge just watches CNN, he'll go, well, he's kind of saying, you're saying the same thing he did. He just said it 17 or 18 months before you did.
Yeah. It's for, and as you know, I can talk forever. I know you said you got an hour. It's 4, so I just want to let you know. But so what I was going to say earlier is, so like last like I don't know, maybe like February or March. I mean, there are episodes of me saying this is a lab leak, and again, that's also kind of it's not like I was, it's not exactly a genius to say it was a lab leak like a year ago, and I was saying that. But then what I also started saying was, like, as I learn more and more about history and the CIA, the intelligence community, and the layers of deception, is that, you good?
Yeah, I'm just telling.
Oh, sorry. I thought you got hurt. I was like, fuck.
Oh no.
He's here. He's but it's like I was just looking at like layers of like, right, it's like
you said let me get this right. You said in last March that it was a lab leak, or this March?
Like 2020.
Wow,
this is episode 503. Episode 69 was the Wuhan clan. That was the title of the episode. It was just me and some friends, and we were talking. It was actually with some former like Air Force counterintelligence guys, and I was talking about the importance of like we need to make like a bio Delta team that when we find out there's a leak somewhere, we send them in to just ice everybody. But the very first episode, December 12th, 2019, was about Hong Kong and the protesters and how isn't this unique that it's going away now. But so I try to look at like tiers of things. So it's like, for instance, like let's just look at like facts. 9/11, right? Oh, it makes sense. The Islamist terrorists, they hate freedom, sure. And then you go in deeper and you go, well, there's also like $50 trillion of oil in the Middle East. Did we want a justification to go occupy that land? And I mean, if you really want to get into some like cold calculus, like if we occupy that land and then secure oil for our nation for the next century, would that actually offset like a larger number of deaths from like a World War III? But there are these layers, right? And it's only just kind of like the lab leak. It's like that new meme. What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a fact? 12 to 18 months, right? And you find out Gulf of Tonkin. Well, of course they'd attack us. It's Vietnam, and it's like, well, was it us? Did we have interest there? Who was making money off this? Same thing with Pearl Harbor. Same thing with the USS Maine. Same thing with the Lusitania. It's like you find these deeper and deeper layers. So at first, it's like virus from Wuhan. Okay, it's got to be China, right? It's just basic facts. You look at it. Well, I went to middle school in Atlanta, and I remember every morning my mom driving us, we'd go by the CDC. And there was like this really close by, actually, there's like all these, like this kind of like low income housing and all these kind of like little shops and stuff. But to me, it was like, if a new virus arose right there, and you can see the big glass CDC building right there, you'd be like, hold on, 1 + 1, hold on here. Like, I may be on a short bus, but like, I'm looking at this, You could be on a bus so short that you're in the back row with your feet on the dashboard, but even those people could see that connection, right?
Right.
But then, is that a little too obvious? If I was the U.S. and I wanted to, let's not worry about why or anything, let's just think about some simple, if I wanted to do this, wouldn't I release it right next to Wuhan? If the Chinese wanted to release a virus, wouldn't you do it right next to the CDC? Now, what could be the justifications for that? I mean, geopolitics, make China look bad. Hey, you killed 4 million people. I mean, if you really want to get into some 5D chess, China wants to overthrow America by 2049 with the 100-year plan, unrestricted warfare, asymmetric warfare, never ask the way to the emperor's cauldrons. They want to take over America without firing a shot. Did we turn it on them? And are we we're going to release a virus from Wuhan so that the rest of the world thinks it's you? And then when you refuse to pay us $10 trillion in lost economic output, we can then cancel our debt to you and keep this Federal Reserve sham going on for another 50 years. I mean, when you get to these upper levels of things like Raven Rock, and Garrett Graff, the author of Raven Rock, I've had him on here too. When you get to the levels of that stuff, like, it's all fair game. I mean, SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, like having lasers in space, like when you get to the rarefied air of nations fighting nations for global hegemony, nothing's off the table. And so, as I did say that last March, so what I do want to say today, Thursday, July 8th, 2021, is that I think there's one of two outcomes, and then I'll let you go. I know I'm holding you hostage. there's one of two outcomes. The first is it really did jump from a pangolin to a unicorn or whatever. Occam's razor, it broke out. A bunch of politicians. It wasn't a grand Illuminati plan. It was actually just a bunch of politicians who wanted to save their ass and get re-elections. So they were like, we're doing something big. We're going to get vaccines. Big Pharma released 4 vaccines, and they went, hey, here's a 7 billion person mandated clinical trial that we cannot be sued for. We can test out all the new bells and whistles on this. We're going to save $5 billion in R&D. This is the windfall of the millennia. We can get everyone to take this shit, and then they get in bed with big tech, and they're like, hey, suppress other existing generic medications because we're making record profits. We know that. We know bankers owned newspapers in the early 20th century to only publish good paper. Jeff Bezos in the Washington Post. Occam's razor, and there's no grand depopulation plan. COVID's really not that bad, but it was just a perfect storm of money and greed. It's nothing we haven't seen before. We saw it with WMDs in Iraq. Other option is that the United States released it near Wuhan to destroy their global standing without firing a shot, playing their game because they know they can't take our military on. And we have a backup plan, the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, with ground-based nuclear missiles surrounding China. But let's try to take them down without firing a shot, some judo shit, and we can then cancel our debt when they refuse to pay us $10 trillion in lost economic reparations. And the rest of the world, unlike just after 9/11 having everyone kind of join us with like the NATO coalition, the rest of the world all have bodies in the ground, and they're going, yeah, we agree with the United States. Is it just like 5D chess? And I know right now I sound like a crackhead on the soapbox corner, like it's all fucking 5G. I think it's Occam's razor. Or
well, let me throw one alternative right there in the middle, okay? Which is what happened on October 19th, 2020, okay? When this thing broke out in, now everyone...
2019?
2019. What happened October 19th, 2019, when Sanjay Gupta now says it's a super spreader event was the NATO Wuhan Games, okay? At the same time that the walking in with the flags, into these military games, Bill Gates, with Event 201, the leading proponent of the vaccines, and Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, the leading proponent of robotization of the world, and with a shutdown, untouched by human hands, your food was prepared with a robot. Those two guys put on just so happens the exact same day, put on a big fear event saying there was going to be a world pandemic and we're the only ones that can do anything about it. Then Klaus Schwab writes a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution saying if we ever had a pandemic, it would be a great time to invest in robots. Then he writes a book called The Great Reset, which is, boy, I'm glad we had a pandemic because now we can invest in robots. And oh, by the way, ever since my family has harbored these paperclip scientists in Switzerland from the day my dad was a Nazi contractor, now we can sell you the robots. This is really great. That's what happened. Okay, so I look to the people who actually benefit and were promoting this as like advertising, coming attractions, pandemic coming to your theater soon, right? And then it happens. And then when I see people putting, NATO putting and embedding people from Holland into the United States team, into the United States, does somebody who worked for 10 years ago for the Supreme Allied Commander really need a job as a security guard in Fort Belvoir?
Yeah.
Really? Do they need a job that bad, that they have to go, why is that? Why is it always the proposals always go to the Benassi family? I'm just asking questions. So I love the fact that you've had all these authors on that I've read the books. Alabec, I've been a big biopreparator guy, and then the Rock Raven book is a great book.
Raven Rock is my favorite nonfiction book.
Yeah,
it's great. I've been. It's become a meme on this podcast, just nonstop talking about Raven Rock. I've on a side. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get me to start screaming, and why the fuck don't I have a bigger channel? I'm like, who else do you want me to interview? I've interviewed everyone. It's
you know what? I have a guy in the lobby. I apologize, but
no, I'm keeping you 12 minutes longer than I said.
Yeah, I want to say this. I wanted to finish that off. Tommy, you got the great content, and the world will find you. The world will find you. You have great content. And you're doing the right things. You're doing all the right things. And just like that one guy found you and said, wow, this guy needs support. This guy is going to do some great things if he gets a little bit of, he's not worrying about the rent check always. Yeah. Right? So that's a really beautiful thing somebody did for you. And I just want to say I've invited a whole bunch of my fans to come to this site to see you and introduce you, because I, kind of fell in love with the show and how you do things. Because I think it is kind of like the last chance at humor. It's kind of like the last man standing. You're the last comic standing.
It's the only vector for free speech is you got to make it a joke.
Yeah, it's the last form standing, and you're the last guy. So please, my folk who are here, support this gentleman. He's doing some great stuff. Tweet him out, please tweet him out and give him some support, because you're doing all the right things. You just need to be exposed.
Thanks,
so
man. I'll send this to you, man. I don't know. YouTube let me keep up Robert Malone. They didn't take that one down. I wonder if they're gonna ban this one. That's a careful poker. I know you got to go. It's a careful poker game, as I never know which episodes to just put up a 30-second teaser of and then upload to Rumble and BitChute. Man, if this episode doesn't get taken down, something's gone terribly wrong. I don't fucking know. I'll send it to you when it's up. Please tweet it out, because I've got about a whopping 11 followers on Twitter, and I think you've got a little more than that. So please tweet it out. I will put all of your stuff in the description, as always. And we didn't kill ourselves, and it all goes back to Benny Benassi, base to the face. And
let me with the 2 seconds.
Benny Benassi.
So somebody says, hey, do you realize we were going to talk about this guy Kolomoisky, who sends in these skinhead neo-Nazis into Hong Kong to spray everybody. And he's spraying all the people in Hong Kong to quell the protests, right? And he's working for the Chinese government. And they say, well, do you realize that he's got a spokesmodel for getting Crimea back?
Fuck.
Okay? She's this incredible, bring her up sometime, Nastia. She's an incredible electro-techno DJ person. And we're like, and this guy's kind of, he's about your age, about 30, and, he's like really into all the techno stuff. He goes, yeah, she's Nastia. She works for Kolomoisky. She's the girl for Crimea. And then I say, well, who does she work for? Benny Benassi.
You get down to the inner sanctum of NORAD and the innermost vault behind the level 12 BSL, and you go at the very, who does the president take their orders from? It's Benassi sitting there on a throne with gold rings and a fucking DJ set, and it's Klaus Schwab is at his feet feeding him grapes, and he's like, The Great Reset is actually the name of his newest album, and then he's just gonna drop that shit. I forgot what I was just gonna say. I will let you go. I was gonna say something else. I don't remember. I'll let you go. I've kept you for 15 minutes longer, and we'll put this one up. And Mr. Webb didn't kill himself. I didn't kill myself. And I'm gonna email you. Completely unrelated. There's a book you need to read called Eye in the Sky: Rise of the Gorgon Stare. I think you would love it. And very lastly, can you give a shout out to my friend David O'Neill? He's a friend that I met through someone else, came on this podcast, and he's the one that introduced. He said, you should find George Webb. And I was like, who the fuck is George Webb? And he was like, you need to have him on your podcast. Can you give a shout out to David O'Neill?
Hey, David, contact me. We'll have you on the show. I love it when people, this is how it works. And it's a beautiful meritocracy where people find really great content and they tell other people. That still works in America, and that's really cool. David O'Neill, send me a thing. Thanks.
God bless America. God bless you, Mr. Webb. Thank you so much for coming on here. Stay safe, everybody. And we did not kill ourselves. God bless America. Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh. COVID was a bioengineered weapon released from the communist lab to overthrow a democratically elected president, and now the government is forcing an un-FDA-approved vaccine on its people. That's the wrap. Now we're banned.
Recording stopped.
All right. Thanks, Tommy. I got to run, brother.
Man. Peace.